In order to grow, we must obtain what is necessary for growth. This is brought about through the law of attraction. This principle is the sole means by which the individual is differentiated from the universal. It is evident that the individual is simply the differentiation of the one universal mind, which lighteth every man that cometh into the world. And his so-called individuality or personality consists of nothing but the manner in which he relates with the whole. So welcome guys to Charles Honnell, the Master Key System. We are in chapter 18, part 18. And in this chapter, we're going to go more in detail in terms of understanding the differentiation of the individual. Not the little me, but the large I. The I that is the individual and unique expression of the universe. The large I that is part of the omnipresent, omnipotent, and the omniscient. We're going to talk about how that should be empowering for you, understanding it in your day-to-day life. So let's get into it. A new civilization is being born. Customs, creeds, and precedent are passing. Vision, faith, and service are taking their place. The fetters of tradition are being melted away from humanity, and as the impurities of materialism are being consumed, thought is being liberated, and truth is rising full road before an astonished multitude. The whole world is on the eve of a new consciousness, a new power, and a new realization within the self. As it so happens, we're recording this particular episode during an unprecedented time, not only in our nation, but in our world, where the words quarantine and virus and these sorts of things are taking on a whole new meaning. So this thought from Charles Honnell is a very present thought, if you will. The world is on the eve of a new consciousness. I think many people are beginning to understand that systems and systems of the world are subject to fail, and that if there's going to be any power, the real power is going to come from within and not from without. It is a recognition of natural laws that has enabled us to annihilate time and space, to soar in the air and make iron float. And the greater the degree of intelligence, the greater will be our recognition of these natural laws, and the greater will be the power we can possess. Thought is creative. Honnell continues to drill that in. Thought is creative, and the principle on which the law is based is sound and legitimate and is inherent in the nature of things. But this creative power does not originate in the individual, but in the universal, which is the source and foundation of all energy and substance. The individual is simply the channel for the distribution of this energy. So think about it this way. In church sects and in Christian terminology, we're told that all things are made by him and through him and are him, meaning, in church, obviously that's referring to God. Well, the difference between that understanding and what Honnell is saying is that take it a step further, because in Christian sects or in religion, it is considered blasphemous to consider yourself God. But actuality, what you're saying is that you are a part of the whole. You are made in the image and the likeness of all there is. So what else would you be? What else would you be? The only substance that exists is that of the universal. And if you come from that substance, you are of that substance. And the only difference is one in degree. You're part of the whole. You are part of the whole. That is the empowering piece of this. That is the step further needed to be taken. You are a creator. The individual is simply the means by which the universal produces the various combinations which result in the formation of phenomena. Anything that happens in the objective world is considered phenomena. An individual, an adult, a baby, a dog, a cat, wind blowing, etc. It depends upon the law of vibration, whereby various rates of rapidity of motion in the primary substance form new substances only in certain exact numerical ratios. Thought is the invisible link by which the individual comes into communication with the universal. We said that before, but it's worth honing in on here because this is a process. You need to understand how we're linked to the universal. Thought is the invisible link by which the individual, you and I, comes into communication with the universal. And I want to kind of insert here, and I think it's very important. I'm going to put it in the description and link as well. It's important to really understand what that means. And it makes me think of Neville Goddard and his lectures and his ideology in terms of the human imagination, what the human imagination is. And Neville believed the human imagination to be the actual voice of God. That is God within you that is always speaking and guiding you to do these new and different things, the human imagination. And I want you to listen to his lecture on that and really complement what we're doing here with Charles Honnell and the Master Key System, because they're saying the same thing, a little different way, but they're saying the same thing. Thought is that link. It's the invisible link between you and the universal, the finite and the infinite, the seen and the unseen. Thought is the magic by which the human is transformed into a being who thinks and knows and feels and acts. The only belief which is of any value to anyone is a belief that has been put to a test and demonstrated to be a fact. It is then no longer a belief, but has become a living faith or truth. Now, I'm going to be careful in saying this because, again, I don't want to be offensive to anyone who is religious or in religious areas. But here's what I would say about that particular statement. Number one, I believe it to be true, not only from a faith-based or a spiritual-based standpoint, but just simply from a logical, scientific standpoint. How can you believe something to be that has not been proven? 2 + 2 is 4 because we can prove it. As our teachers used to say, show your work. Just don't write the answer, show your work. How did you come to that conclusion? How did you come to that end? So what I found problematic for me while I was in church environments was that so much was mystical. So much of what was being done was unexplainable. So it was very difficult for me to grasp what exactly I was supposed to do in order to achieve a certain outcome. And then couple that with, watching different religious programs, and then people are saying different things. And on top of that, people are saying God is saying different things. It's almost as if he's schizophrenic. You turn to one channel, he's saying this. You turn to one channel, he's saying that. And so many people have used that approach. Ministers, preachers, and evangelists have used this God said, God spoke to me, God is saying today type of situation to move and motivate people in a certain direction. And unfortunately, so many people put their trust in people, men, ministers, and they don't put their trust in themselves. They never stop to think, ask, what do I feel about this? First of all, can I go inside? Can I go internally and figure this out? Because there's power internally. The answer is not without. The answer is always within. Now, there are many pointers, and religion can be a pointer. It certainly can. It pointed me. But I will say this, just be very careful. Never believe what anyone says wholeheartedly and completely until you can prove it for yourself. And what Honnell is saying here, the only belief which is of any value is a belief that has been put to a test. So, for example, if I drive an American car and my friend drives a Japanese car, in order for us to discern which car is faster, we would obviously have to put it to a test. We could suppose all day. Well, my speedometer says it goes 120 miles an hour. Well, my speedometer says it goes 140 miles an hour, so my car will go faster. It's not been proven. Perhaps a rudimentary example, but we believe, and I say we from a humanity standpoint, we believe so much information. So much information comes to us on a daily basis because we're so inundated with news and data and information. We never test the information. We never ask, I shouldn't say never. So many of us fail to ask the critical question. Why? How? Is this true? What is the source of this information? So many of us simply consume it, and that's dangerous. So for your purposes, as we are embodying and embarking on this spiritual journey together, what we believe is in order to have a belief, have a system, have a truth, it must be tested. And again, the reason why I was drawn to Hanel and the Master Key system is because it blended what I knew from the religious environment to what I understood on the scientific side. In other words, there are natural laws in place, and I can understand how we got to where we are. And that's important because you need to know where you are. You need to know where you are. And the last thing I'll say, and we'll move on, is just think of it this way. As you are gathering information on your spiritual journey, you're listening to lectures like this, you're reading additional content, books, listening to Audible, whatever you're doing to feed yourself, great. Here's why you're doing that. Number one, you would like to discern a method by which to live more productively. A method, a means, an ideal that you can incorporate that would produce the results that you desire. And Hanel is saying here, the only belief which is of any value to anyone is one that's been tested. So when you're reading, when you're listening and watching, what you're reading, listening, and watching for is an example of a system that works. That is exactly why so many people crowd churches every Sunday. They're looking for a system to incorporate in their lives that works. So, what we want to do, our goal at True Higher Self, is to provide pointers in the direction of systems that we believe work. And systems may be too strong. Ideas, understanding, a fresh understanding, a fresh perspective. Because as you've heard, if you change your perspective of things, the things you perceive will change. So that's our goal here. So let's move on. Now, and this truth has been put to the test by hundreds of thousands of people and have been found to be truth exactly in proportion to the usefulness of the apparatus which they have used. So that is to say, for example, in engineering, in mathematical fields, there are certain knowns or assumptions. And the reason why they are known or assumed is that, number one, they have been tried and tested. And number two, every scientist, every engineer uses them as a basis for beginning. They don't go all the way back to trying to understand simple math. There are certain foundational principles that have been established. There's no need to revisit that. What Hanel is saying here is the same with the natural laws. In order to grow, we must obtain what is essential for our growth. As we are at all times a complete thought entity, this completeness makes it possible for us to receive only as we give. Growth is therefore conditioned on reciprocal action. Giving, receiving. Giving, receiving. And we find that on the mental plane, like attracts like. that mental vibrations respond only to the extent of their vibratory harmony. It is clear, therefore, that thoughts of abundance will respond only to similar thoughts. So if you feel like, hey, I want to be abundant, financially abundant, then what you're going to have to do is suggest to yourself means and mechanisms by which you are financially abundant, and create what we always say here is a positive habitual thought pattern. Create that momentum where you're only on that vibratory plane. Why? Hanel says that on those planes, like will attract like. Conversely, when you're very low, you're going to attract whatever's on that low vibrational level. The wealth of the individual is seen to be what he inherently is. Affluence within is found to be the secret of attraction for affluence without. The ability to produce is found to be the real source of wealth of the individual. It is for this reason that he who has his heart in his work is certain to meet with unbounded success. He will give and continually give, and the more he gives, the more he will receive. I think to some degree, every religion has some sort of saying, scripture, as it relates to giving. Giving and receiving, if you think of it as a plane, or a rod or a stick, and you on one hand you have giving, on the other hand you have receiving, they're the same, really the same energy. And the more you do of giving, the more you can receive. In actuality, once you enter into your entrepreneurship, one of the more prolific understandings I've come upon on my journey is this. The ability to provide a product or a service to individuals in need, it really can manifest in great success. Just think about products that you use on an everyday basis. 10 years or 12 years ago, everyone didn't have a cell phone. Nowadays, there are literally no home phones, and everyone has a cell phone. Well, why? What need did it replace, or did it fix? What gap did it close? Just think about that. So as you're developing your ideas for building your entrepreneurship, think about the needs of people and try to provide a solution to the problems of people. And that is a lot of success there. That's giving and receiving. You're giving of yourself. To whom? Those around you. What will you receive? You will receive their blessing. Their blessing in the form of thank yous, their blessings in the form of monetary value for your product or your service. Thought is the energy which the law of attraction is brought into operation. Again, thought. Thought is the energy in which the law of attraction is brought into operation, which eventually manifests in abundance. The universal mind is static mind, or substance in equilibrium. It is differentiated into form by our power to think. Thought is the dynamic phase of mind. So think about it like this. So the way Hanel is presenting it here, the universal mind is just he's called it static mind. It's just hanging out. It's not really doing anything, okay? It's there. It's accessible by us through one prolific method, and that is thinking. And so thinking is our power to access this substance. And thought, he calls it, is the dynamic phase of mind. So we make our requests through thought. That's how we connect to the universal mind. Whether that thought is constructive, destructive, high energy, low energy, it doesn't matter. We are accessing the universal substance, this universal mind, the static mind, through our thought process. And the power depends upon the consciousness of power. Power depends upon consciousness of power. Unless we use it, we shall lose it. And unless we are conscious of it, we cannot use it at all. Attention has been held to be the distinguishing mark of genius. The cultivation of attention depends upon practice. The incentive of attention is interest. The greater the interest, the greater the attention. The greater the attention, the greater the interest in action and reaction, back and forth. Begin by paying attention. Before long, you will have aroused interest. This interest will attract more attention, and this attention will produce more interest, and so on. This practice will enable you to cultivate the power of attention. The power of attention. Now this week, guys, when we go into our quiet place, into our meditative corners, if you will, we're going to concentrate on the power to create, to seek insight, perception, try to find a logical basis for the faith which is in you. Let the thought dwell on the fact that the physical man lives and moves and has his being in the sustainer of all organic life air, that he must breathe to live. That's what we were talking about before. Everything was made by him and through him and is him. Just think about that. Think about your connectivity to all there is. Then let that thought rest on the fact that the spiritual man also lives and moves and has his being in a similar but subtler energy upon which he must depend for life. And that as in the physical world, no life assumes form until after a seed is sown, and in no higher fruit than that of the parent stock can be produced. So, in the spiritual world, no effect can be produced until the seed is sown, and the fruit will be dependent upon the nature of the seed. So, the results which you secure depend upon your perception of the law in the mighty domain of causation, the highest evolution of human consciousness. So let me see if I can make this a little bit more relatable, or at least tell you what this means to me. So what I do is first, I consider myself, okay, I'm in my quiet place, I've quieted my mind and I am settled. And I begin to dwell upon the thought. Now, this is not necessarily meditation. You are proving to yourself the faith that is in you, like Anel said. So you're considering yourself not the small me, but the larger I that is connected to the omnipotent, the omnipresent, and the omniscient. The universal mind. You see yourself as the man who lives and moves and has his being, the man or woman who lives and moves and has their being in the sustainer of all life, the substance that sustains all life. You're there. And there is where you want to plant your seed. The difference between the little me, your ego, your personality, planting a seed, versus the large I, the one that is connected to the universal mind, it couldn't be greater. It couldn't be greater. When you consider that you have access to all things and you plant a seed in that understanding, the seed is going to grow and it's going to manifest. And you will have a different perspective of the process in and of itself. So this week, let's go into our quiet places and concentrate on this particular understanding. And let me know how it goes. Put some comments in the comment field below. I'm interested to know how you guys are doing on this journey. This is part 18. We've come to the conclusion. I'm going to wrap up here with a few summary thoughts. But we only have about 4 more lectures to go before we'll be done with the Master Key System. I certainly hope you've been enjoying this so far. And some of the things that we want to close out with just to drive home are these. First question, where does the creative power originate? Where does creative power originate? In the universal, the substance that is the sustainer of all life. How does the universal create form? Well, by means of the individual, like you and I. You can think this way. We are unique and individual expressions of the universe. Lastly, what is the connecting link between the individual and the universal? And I know you know this because we harped on this. It's thought. Thought is the connecting link between the individual, you and I, and the universal. That is thought. Now, your thought can be called a prayer, it can be called meditation or affirmation, but it is a thought. And that's how we connect with the universal substance. So guys, I really hope you've enjoyed this week and there are some great takeaways. Again, check out the descriptions below. We're always trying to leave nice little goodies there for you to download and to empower you on your day to day. And any good thoughts, any good things that happened to you this week, please put them in the description below. Make sure you subscribe to our channel, follow us on YouTube, and there's more good and empowering information to come. Have a great week.